Hi, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, the mascot for the Level-Headed Fanboy. Welcome to a very special video, this time on the top 15 best Sonic games of all time. Now, a couple years back, I did do a video on the top 10 worst. I'll leave a link to that in the pinned comments so you can go check that out and find out what my top 10 worst are. You'll be surprised it is pretty different from most top 10 worst Sonic game lists. Spoiler alert, Sonic 06 and Sonic Boom are not on that list. But for the best list, we've got 15 entries. This is because there are some games I still just wanted to talk about because I hold them very high regard. Now, if you love Sonic the Hedgehog and you like Sonic content, there's an abundance of it on my channel, so if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more Sonic to come and you won't be disappointed. And of course, if you do already watch these videos, you're already subscribed and you like the cut of my jip, please do consider checking out the Patreon link in the description below, as it is a huge help and it is hugely appreciated, and there are some rewards there to make it worth your while. So for this ranking, do keep in mind that this is, at the end of the day, just my personal opinion. These are not necessarily ranked objectively. Enjoyment and lasting impact are the major things at play here. Because, I mean, what else do you play a game for? So without further ado, on to the list. And in at number 15, we have The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. Kicking things off with a freebie game marketed as an April Fool's prank. What we have here is effectively an interactive novel, but true to the spirit of Sonic, there are also some arcadey elements in there. So for this game, it is Amy Rose's birthday, and she's having a murder mystery themed party aboard a train, akin to Murder on the Orient Express. And Sonic is the murder victim, so you go around the train interrogating the different passengers, who are all various friends of Amy who have been invited to the party. It's a really fun little story with a great little twist where it turns out that the train is a badnik, wanting to imprison the conductor out of separation anxiety. But where this shines the most is the excellent characterization of all the different characters in this game. This is probably some of the best writing they've ever had in a video game, which is kind of saying something. It's Amy and Tails who really get the spotlight here, and it's nice to see these two otherwise side characters being celebrated. Especially Amy, where I think we've got a really nice midway point between the emotionally candid girly girl Amy of, say, the 2000s, and the more modern interpretations that have matured up a little bit. She's not as much of an obsessed hothead as she was in the 2000s, but they've still allowed her to be quite bubbly and upbeat in this one, which I feel is missing from a lot of the more modern Amy Rose media. Another highlight is Shadow, where we see his more caring and compassionate side come to the spotlight in this game. But as I mentioned, there are some arcadey elements too. In a moment where the characters need to kind of think and reflect upon what they've learned, you get this obstacle dodging, ring collecting minigame, which does stay true to the more arcadey aspects of Sonic the Hedgehog. They even found a way to work it into a sort of final boss for the game. This is the one entry on this list where the story is at the absolute forefront of the game, so it was important that they got that right, as well as elements like characterization, and the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog knocks it out of the park, which is why it does make it onto the top 15 best list. In at number 14 is Sonic Heroes, a game that does have its problems, but ultimately delivers a satisfying gameplay experience if you are willing to look past a few aspects. The absolute worst thing about this game is the structure where you have to complete 4 stories and get all of the Chaos Emeralds in order to unlock the final story, especially when you factor in Team Chaotix. The real problem here is that too much of the game is mandatory rather than being something that you could just save for later. And even then, there are some weaker elements too. Sonic and the gang do not control as well as they did in the Adventure series. But put it this way, if you were to just pick up the game and say, I'm gonna commit and just play Sonic's story and kind of leave it at that, you'll actually get a satisfying experience out of this. The levels are vast and packed with content. It's all fast-paced action. So it's kind of like, if you just pick one of the stories to play, you'll likely have a flawed but nonetheless good time. But I think the reason why Sonic Heroes stuck with as many people as it did is partly down to the art style and music. This was the first of the 3D Sonic games to really bring the Sonic aesthetic into its level design and bring back level archetypes that you'd recognize from the classics. But the soundtrack was also probably one of the most upbeat that the series has ever had. There's just a real party atmosphere to this one, with its bright colors, its energetic music, and its overall light-hearted story revolving around teamwork. I think these are the things that people are going to remember the most. And when a Sonic game is kind of suffering from kind of too much content, I suppose you could have worse problems. In at number 13 is Sonic Colors. Probably one of the most back-to-basics modern Sonic games. While it doesn't meet the highs of the entries on this list that will come higher in the ranking, there's a consistent baseline level of enjoyment with this one that just left me overall satisfied. There's no other playable characters or playstyles, you are just playing as Sonic, albeit with the power-ups of the Wisps, adding in just a little variety to Sonic Colors without hinging too far on it. This is probably one of the most Sonic-centric modern Sonic games because of that. The basic gameplay for Sonic is an evolution of the day stage gameplay from Sonic Unleashed, albeit a little bit more simplified for the Wii's controls. You've got your boost, stomp, and homing attack, but things like the drift are much more situational this time. It's a good gameplay style, and it is nice to get just a whole game of that. The weak point, though, is that the game does feel spread just a little bit thin, which is crazy considering that at the time this released, this was one of the shortest modern Sonic games, clocking in around about the 3-hour mark. Each zone, or in this case, planet or space locale, whatever you want to call it, comes with 7 acts, and only 2 out of 7 of those acts will feel like proper Sonic stages, with a nice blend of high-speed platforming and 3D gameplay. The rest is mostly 2D gimmick-based platforming, where if you don't use your Wisps, you're probably not going to have a very fast-paced experience. And even then, at times the Wisps are mandatory on your first playthrough. That is until you unlock Supersonic. The Act 1s and 2s of these stages are really solid stuff. But from there, everything becomes a bit more granular, with stages revolving around hitting switches to turn barriers, or bouncing on a moving spring and just kind of keeping up with it. Which just kind of feels like busy work that should have been optional. Yet if it wasn't, the game would only be around about 45 minutes long. That said, it's not bad or unpleasant by any means. You can have some fun with some of these challenges. There is a lot of disappointing elements to Sonic Colors looking back now. For a game marketed as a 3D Sonic game, the majority of it is side-scrolling gameplay. But on an objective level, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. What makes Sonic Colors shine is actually more or less just the stuff that made Sonic Heroes shine. An energetic soundtrack, and really strong art direction with colorful levels. But I would say that Sonic Colors is a smarter game than Sonic Heroes. There's just a baseline level of quality here, which is just solid. Sonic Colors is a really solid time. The absolute weakest link in this one is the storyline, because while it is a simple story, which I actually think was quite a good thing for the time, it was quite refreshing at the time it came about, the writing within that simple story is pretty pants. But overall, it is a solid game. In at number 12 is Sonic CD, a game that, as Game Apologist said, typically makes the bottom of people's classic Sonic games tier list, but I really think this one is an acquired taste. It's a game that I didn't rate very highly the first time I played it, but have just kind of fell in love with the more I've played it. And I think the weaker aspects of Sonic CD are going to be more divisive than necessarily bad. There is a much greater emphasis on exploration in this game than your standard classic Sonic fare, as now you need to hunt around for past signposts to take you into the past, destroy a robot generator to save the future. And every stage in this game has a past, present, and 2 future aesthetics, a good future and an apocalyptic future where Dr. Eggman has conquered. But if you do want to play this as just a standard Sonic game without all the time travel, that is an option too, and you can even still get the good ending by getting all of the time stones through the special stages. Personally, I kinda love the bad futures. Remember how awesome the concept of Sonic Forces was, a game where Dr. Eggman has successfully taken over the world? Well, Sonic CD kinda delivers that in its bad future stages and does a much better job with it. But at the forefront of my appreciation for Sonic CD comes just the fact that this game has style. It's a more colorful game than any of the other Sonic games in this era. And while I do prefer the slightly more earthy look of, say, Sonic 3 and Knuckles or Sonic 2, this game is still distinctive within that for this reason. And the music, there's 2 soundtracks, and they are both fantastic. My favorite of the 2 is is definitely the Japanese and European soundtrack. It's got more that sort of New Jack style to it, which I really like. But the USA version is no slouch either. But Sonic CD is also home to a lot of elements that would go on to be iconic in Sonic history today. We've got the opening and ending cutscenes animated by Toei Animations, and they still stand as some of the most iconic cutscenes in Sonic history. You've got the first appearance of the beloved Amy Rose, as well as the iconic first showdown between Sonic and Metal Sonic. Sonic CD is absolutely no slouch, and I really regret kind of overlooking it for as long as I did, because the more I play this one, the more I really like it. Coming in at number 11 is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Funny to think that Sonic 2 landed on both the best Sonic games list and the worst, but purely because the worst one's the 8-bit version and the best one is the 16-bit version. 16-bit Sonic 2 is a rip-roaring blockbuster of a game. This is the point where Sonic really became Sonic, where Sonic really came into his own. Yes, the predecessor Sonic 1 did offer us fast-paced gameplay, but it didn't really offer us environments that would complement that. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 explodes out of the gate with high-octane speedway after speedway. Everything that made Sonic 1 great has been doubled down on here. The game is just all in all way more confident in its style and its gameplay, but this is also the first time we see a lot of iconic elements such as Tails, the Death Egg, the Spin Dash. The weakness of Sonic 2 is that I definitely feel there is a drop-off in quality in the last, say, 25% of the game. I think once you get to Oil Ocean Zone, it's kind of all downhill from there. It's a game that really wants to become more challenging as it goes, but really struggles to kind of find a happy medium between challenging and fair, especially when you look at stages like Metropolis Zone, which just have a cheap amount of difficulty. But that doesn't discount how brilliant everything before that point is. So I can fully understand why this would make the top of a lot of people's lists. Coming in at number 10 is Sonic Mania, and on a baseline quality standpoint, it's outstanding. On an objective level, Sonic Mania is very strong. It takes a lot of what made the classics great and makes it even better. The whole gimmick with this game is making the old new again. You've got the classic Sonic gameplay style, but it feels refreshed in a brand new adventure. You've got the return of a lot of iconic Sonic stages, but in their second acts, they've been completely reworked to play like brand new levels. And then in there, you've got 4 legitimately brand new levels made by the brand new team. This game is a warm, nostalgic hug that kind of shows that we can do things better than we ever did before. Like, for example, the music. It's the tunes you recognize, but they sound better than ever now that they've been reworked by T. Lopes. The pixel art style returns, but it's a much higher fidelity and has a lot more frames to the animations, creating a much smoother image that still gives that retro feel. What pulls Sonic Mania down quite a bit on this list for me, though, is just the over-reliance on the familiar. I could forgive this perhaps just a little more if both acts of the returning stages were completely original, with brand new layouts and a brand new overall gameplay experience, even if they are still using, say, the Green Hill Zone aesthetic. But sadly, each of these returning stages will have at least just one act which is stuff that we have already done before, just with nicer visuals and music. And I just don't see the appeal of that. It's where the Mania team really get creative and do new stuff where Sonic Mania shines the most, and in the 4 original stages that we have in this game, it does showcase that. Personally, I think this would have been a much better game if it were all original. But again, I am a bit biased. There is a baseline level of quality to this one that eclipses any of the other classic games, so it's why it's on this list anyway. For a game that is mostly just a little bit been there, done that, it still shines. In at number 9, and this is going to be controversial, but we have Sonic Superstars. And I recognize that there are some objective elements that don't work as well as, say, Sonic Mania. There are more technical bugs in there, the boss fights can be a bit of a slog, and the music is a really mixed bag. I do get that, I do recognize that. However, personally, I do prefer Sonic Superstars to Sonic Mania, based on the merit that while it is a classic Sonic game, it is at least a brand new top-to-bottom experience this time. In that while the levels are still, considering they're all original, a bit been there, done that, there's never a point where I feel like I am just doing the same stuff I did in other games again. That over-reliance on the familiar isn't really an issue when it comes to Sonic Superstars, and I would say that's a bigger issue than things like technical bugs. But there's also a lot of new elements here that I really enjoy, such as the new Emerald power-ups, the 3D model art style, and the character-specific story acts. No, it is not to the quality of Sonic Mania, but I do generally just prefer the overall experience of playing Sonic Superstars, just for the fundamental basis that it's all new this time. In at number 8 is Sonic Rush Adventure. There was a lot that I really enjoyed about the first Sonic Rush, mainly being the debut of the boost gameplay and the trick system. I really enjoyed Blaze the Cat as a character, and I thought the story was really solid, and it just had a great sense of style to it. However, the level design just wasn't great in my opinion. Sonic Rush Adventure takes everything that worked about the first Sonic Rush and pairs it with better level design, better boss fights, and more of an emphasis on world building. There's a reason why this one is called Sonic Rush Adventure, because structurally it's a little closer to, say, Sonic Adventure 1, complete with more RPG elements such as a hub world. And while it might not be for everything, I actually really love the little gimmick where you have to chart a course for the next level and travel there via a water vehicle. These sections are short enough to not break the pacing too much, but if anything, just complement the world building. This place just feels lived in. But I also adore how this game really leans into the fantasy genre. We've got Sonic mashed up with things like dinosaurs and pirates and skeletons and automatons, which is something we don't often see from Sonic, so I really enjoy that. I'd heard negative things before playing this one, but I really ended up enjoying all of it. The sea vehicle sections were not the big intrusion to me that I guess they were to other people. If anything, they were just another element complementing the game's really strong world building. For that reason, it's probably one of my personal favorites when it comes to 2D Sonic games. It's an exhilarating, refreshing, and truly immersive adventure. In at number 7 is Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. This is as good as it gets for retro gaming, in my opinion. Because Sonic 3 and Knuckles is, to all intents and purposes, perfection. When it comes to any kind of objective flaws about this game, I suppose you could say maybe Sandopolis Act 2's a little too long, or the up-down barrel in Carnival Night is just not very well telegraphed. But that's it. Really just two very small issues. By the time you get to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, they'd effectively perfected the classic Sonic gameplay style. But now they've added a few new elements to really just get the most out of these levels and this gameplay style, such as elemental shields that will protect you from certain environmental hazards and offer you different power-up advantages, bonus stages on top of special stages, mini-bosses on top of the regular boss fights, and there's much more of an emphasis on storytelling as well this time. Between the in-game sprite cutscenes, which really do go a long way to tell the story considering they have no dialogue, and just aspects of the level environments. Aside from Sandopolis Act 2, I can't really think of any stage in this game that I didn't at least enjoy, and even then I didn't hate Sandopolis Act 2. It's by no means as bad as any of the bad stages in, say, Sonic 1. The baseline of quality in this game is still incredibly high, and it only gets better from there. The level design really strikes up a nice balance between the speedway level design of Sonic 2 and the more platform-centric level design of Sonic 1, and now it is just really high-speed-based platforming. Levels feel bigger, more vertical as well. There's a lot more spectacle here, and all in all, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is just an epic. It's the Master Emerald saga. It's the story of Knuckles, the enemy-turned-friend. Dr. Robotnik's second attempt at raising the Death Egg into the sky out of sheer defiance, and Sonic and his friends just not letting him do it. There's a real sense of urgency to this one, and that is so well communicated considering that there's no dialogue here. For 2D platformers, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is as good as it gets. In at number 6 is Sonic Generations, the celebration of Sonic's 20th anniversary, bringing everything full circle, celebrating the absolute best of what this franchise has ever achieved, while also not sleeping on Sonic 06, which I really appreciate. This is the game that perfected the boost Sonic gameplay style. The modern Sonic feels a bit more sure-footed than he did in Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors, which affords us a lot more 3D platforming in the levels, and yeah, the levels do feel a lot bigger and more expansive than they did in Sonic Colors and Sonic Unleashed, despite them being longer in Sonic Unleashed. But there's still no lack of high-octane speed, as the boost is still here in full force just like it was in Sonic Unleashed. But now we pair that with the classic Sonic gameplay style. So yeah, half of this game, you play as the modern Sonic in 3D and a little bit of 2D as well, while the other half of the game you play it as the classic Sonic, who is back to being kind of the momentum Sonic, strictly 2D. And while this is by no means a perfect replication of the classic gameplay style, like at all. It is inferior in a lot of ways. The level design does at least accommodate for it, so it doesn't really feel bad on any kind of objective level. It's just when compared to the originals that you notice that, yeah, he's a bit less tactile. And then for the levels, we've got one for each mainline Sonic game. Recreated in, at the time, modern-gen graphics, which still actually look pretty good today, that you can now play through in both styles of gameplay. Now, the reason why this one gets a pass for being all reused levels, while Sonic Mania was let down a little by its over-reliance on existing levels, is because Sonic Generations did it first. This was before it became kind of a tired trope. And the first time you do something like this is always going to be the most impactful. Not to mention, though, that this one has no reused level layouts. They're all original layouts despite the theming being familiar. But then on top of that, if you're bringing back Green Hill Zone, it's going to mean more to me if we are playing through this in a brand new playstyle. So one of the game's highlights for me was playing through the classic stages as modern Sonic, being able to see Green Hill Zone and Chemical Plant in 3D like I'd always kind of dreamt they would be back in the days of the Mega Drive. And from there, the level design only gets better and better for the modern Sonic. Classic Sonic is definitely the weaker of the two Sonics in this game. I find myself returning to the modern stages a lot more than I do the classics. But there's also the different challenge gates, which are a lot of fun as well, and you don't have to do all of them, but I ended up doing all of them anyway just because I was having a lot of fun. The game does admittedly peter out a little bit. The final level being Planet Wisp just doesn't feel nearly climactic enough, and the final boss isn't very good either. But this is probably one of the highest quality modern Sonic games out there, and Sonic Team really knocked it out of the park for the 20th anniversary, giving us a game that really shone a positive light on Sonic history. The game also has that party atmosphere that Sonic Heroes had, but now it's ramped up to like 11. The music is absolutely jumping, the level designs are all very colorful and exciting to look at. It feels like a birthday party fit for Sonic. But that's also as far as it goes. If the idea of two Sonics going back in time throughout Sonic's past sounds like a cool story, then stop thinking about that immediately, because this story is just non-existent this time. It exists purely just to contextualize the gameplay and nothing more. Which is a major missed opportunity, but as a game, this one is still really, really strong. Coming in at number 5 is Sonic Dream Team, the Apple Arcade exclusive. And as much as I love this game, it still sucks that it is exclusive to Apple products, because if this was just available for download on, say, Xbox Live Arcade or PlayStation Plus for, say, I don't know, about $20, I think this game would have been to modern Sonic what Sonic Mania was to classic Sonic. A game that just firmly reminds us why we adore this version of Sonic in just a little quick dose. Sonic Dream Team is like, imagine a 3D Sonic game with all of the polish of a Mario game, which is even more apt considering the game does look like a Nintendo Switch exclusive from a graphical standpoint, which is impressive given that it is designed for mobile devices. The only real drawback of Sonic Dream Team is A, that exclusivity, and B, that it's just quite a short game. There's not a great deal of content here, which does make sense as it is kind of a subscription service thing, so on its own 2 feet, in its own standards for what it is, Sonic Dream Team is pretty much perfect. We've got a simple yet versatile gameplay style. Every character can boost, jump, and homing attack, but then there are 3 different styles on top of that, including flight, gliding, and just super speed, I guess. And even within each of those 3 styles, you still get 2 characters to choose from, so if, say, you wanted to do gliding gameplay, but you really hate Knuckles the Echidna for some stupid reason, you can choose to play as Rouge the Bat instead. For just one example. The level design is really congruent with these gameplay styles as well, offering different alternate routes for these different characters, individual character-specific challenges within the acts, and then the main acts are so packed with alternate paths and are so open that it almost feels like no 2 playthroughs are going to be the same. Make no mistake, Sonic Dream Team is an absolute masterclass of Sonic level design. Levels that promote skill and speed, but are also open-ended enough for you to really just make it your own. There's also a really strong art direction here. The animation is all brilliant, genuinely actually a little better than a lot of the console Sonic games. And while they have gone for stills for most of the cutscenes, they do admittedly work well on their own 2 feet. I think the weakest link here is the music, but even then the music's not bad by any stretch. It's just kind of fit for purpose mobile game stuff. Doesn't really feel as energetic as I think Sonic music should, but I mean, put headphones in and then the basses sound pretty cool. There are elements to the gameplay that I don't necessarily think are desirable. For example, Knuckles and Rouge, they drop down really quickly after a glide, but the levels are designed around that appropriately, so it isn't actually even a problem on any kind of objective level in this game. And I think that's the thing with Sonic Dream Team. It's that congruency between gameplay, level design, and art style that really makes this one excel. Something that a certain console Sonic game that released around a similar time was absolutely lacking in. But there are still some surprises in store. Now, before we get to the top 4 Sonic games, we're gonna go to a quick wellness break with Coach Brett.
Yo, Coach Brett here, interrupting the video for a little bit of movement. All right, guys, so we're gonna do a little thing called the couch stretch. So if you've got tight hips, maybe some hip tension, maybe you're going up the stairs and it doesn't feel that great, you're gonna wanna do this. So what you wanna do first is bring your foot around so that the top of your foot rests on whatever chair or couch that you have behind you. You're gonna wrap your leg around so that your knee is up. You want to tilt your butt in like you're driving it through your legs. And then typically, this is where you'd wanna stay. If you want a little bit more tension, you just drive your body forward a little bit more. Hope this helps.
Hey there, Coach Brett here with True Capacity, your path to a healthier you. And at True Capacity, we've got programs tailored specifically for you. It's a bodyweight program that all you need is just your body weight and a little determination. We've got a minimal equipment program where you don't really need anything, just the essentials. And then we also have a full gym access program where really the only thing you need is a gym membership and you're good to go. So let's embark on this journey together and click the link down below for more details. Thanks, guys. Excited to see you in there.
In at number 4, we have Sonic Adventure. Now, the version of the game that is playing on screen is going to be the Xbox Live Arcade version, and I'm sorry about that. I do prefer the Dreamcast version in a lot of ways. The version that I'm talking about is going to be the Dreamcast version, because the Xbox version is kind of held together with sticks and chewing gum, despite still being the same enjoyable game that it is. Sonic's so-called rough transition to 3D could factor in things like Sonic R and the cancelled Sonic Extreme, but those ought to be considered a footnote when you factor in that with Sonic Adventure, the first fully 3D mainline Sonic game, knocked it out of the park on first try. For the way these characters control, this is still actually one of the best experiences that you will get from Sonic in 3D. You've got the high-speed, momentum-based platforming of the classic Sonic games, but Sonic feels pretty sure-footed here in 3D. He turns well, the platforming is really good, the spin dash is a lot of fun to exploit, and this has also been adapted nicely into the other playable characters that are here too. And the level design is all really solid. Once again, it promotes skillful high-speed gameplay, but with lots of platforming and just really nice immersive environments. A personal favorite of mine being Twinkle Park. But I think what I love so much about Sonic Adventure is just how vast and lived in the world of Sonic feels here. And that's mainly thanks to the hub worlds between levels, or adventure fields as they refer to them as in the game. You've got Station Square, you've got the Mystic Ruins, you've got Angel Island, there's a casino, there's a hotel, and you can just travel to all of these places by train, of all things. And it just goes such a long way to making this world feel immersive and real. I really love that. Each of the playable characters gets their own story. Sonic's is obviously the highlight of the game. Tails' is a lot of fun too, very similar to Sonic's, but now we've got kind of the flight stuff. E102 Gamma's story offers us kind of a chance to play as a villain, effectively, in the Sonic universe, but one that's on a revenge quest and wants to better himself, and it has a really heartbreaking culmination. And of all these stories here, there's only one of these that I didn't really get any enjoyment out of playing through, and that was Big the Cats. Because I don't think it does a good enough job of telling you how to actually catch these fish, and that is something that I don't really want to be mandated to do in a high-speed adventure. If this were just an optional side thing, it would be a little unclear what you have to do, but it would be overall okay. As it is, you can beat the thing in like 15 minutes anyway, so it's not a big deal. Hot take, I actually really enjoyed Amy's story's gameplay. Like, aside from Big the Cat, which I don't truthfully mind, I enjoy all of this. And it's all tied together by a story that feels kind of like Indiana Jones meets Love Actually. This game is the cutest Sonic game I have ever played. It is just oozing with charm. All of these characters are so endearing, their little stories and how they converge. The world they all live in. You've just got this human world and these little rascals just running around in it. And they all have their own little histories, their own little sets of lore. Also, the music of Sonic the Hedgehog, one of the most important components of this franchise, something everyone remembers from the games back on the Mega Drive, is completely redefined by the game's composer, Jun Senoue. It's still very upbeat melodically, just like the classics were, but now we've got a mix of rock instruments, earth instruments, a bit of woodwind. I think my favorite track on this soundtrack is probably Be Cool, Be Wild, and Be Groovy, which plays when you're snowboarding down the ice caps. The fusion between the guitar and the saxophone, two of the coolest instruments, it just feels so very intrinsically Sonic. It's a game that's just going above and beyond, just being better than it has any right to be, and Sonic Adventure is just lovable for that reason. Even for its quirks, such as its frankly kind of rubbish animations, they all factor into the charm here. In at number 3 is Sonic Adventure 2. And on paper, I probably shouldn't love this one as much as Sonic Adventure, in that this time we don't have things like hub worlds tying the game together, so we're now lacking that immersive element. But then, while Sonic Adventure's story had kind of a lot of downtime for the characters to just be running around this world being little rascals, Sonic Adventure 2 has high-octane, world-ending stakes. So there's a sense of urgency that I do feel like things like a hub world would be a little at odds with. And there is still a really cool sense of geography to this one, with Sonic and his friends running around San Francisco, Sonic getting taken to Alcatraz, the adventure goes all the way up to space from the pyramids. This one's a bit more National Treasure meets Star Wars. I think while level design is maybe just a little less open-ended than it was in Sonic Adventure 1, the stages overall feel a bit bigger and more challenging this time around, and a lot more kinetic, which complements the overall spectacle of this game. The whole thing is a little bit more streamlined as well. Rather than having a story for each character, you've got the hero and dark stories, which are home to 3 different playable characters. Things have been refined down to just, there's the Sonic gameplay style, there is the Knuckles treasure hunting gameplay style, and then there is kind of the E102 Gamma gameplay style, which has now been adapted for Tails and Dr. Eggman. And it's really cool to get a chance to kind of play as the antagonists of the game as well, giving us a chance to kind of explore this narrative from both angles. And it's the story tying this whole thing together that really propels Sonic Adventure 2 as one of the all-time greats. A Sonic game has never felt more like an action blockbuster before, full of iconic, memorable moments. This is a Sonic game that story is just so unapologetically high energy that I cannot help but feel like a little kid again as I'm playing it. I am gripped by this story, which is funny considering how kind of silly some of the translation is and how scuffed some of these character animations are. But then that just kind of becomes part of the experience. And remember, it is of its time, but snowboarding down San Francisco to escape from the city is probably still one of the most iconic moments in Sonic history. Everything aboard the Space Colony arc, the final rush, Sonic and Shadow's first confrontation, Prison Island exploding, the rocket launch from Metal Harbor. These are the moments that would define Sonic for the 21st century. And then, of course, we have to talk about Shadow, one of the best Sonic characters ever made. In his debut story, which is also absolutely the best story he's ever featured in. This is his game, make no mistake. A no-nonsense descendant of Gerald Robotnik on a revenge quest to avenge Maria Robotnik after an act of military brutality, killed her as a child in front of him, and because of this he's determined humanity as undeserving? Oh my god, that is so much better than it has any right to be. Explaining this to non-Sonic fans is always so much fun because it's always the last thing they expect to hear. And it encapsulates why I love Sonic so much from just a franchise perspective beyond gameplay. These guys look like Mickey Mouse, but they tell stories that go above and beyond that 1,000-fold. They go hard, and Sonic Adventure 2 just goes so hard. Also, once again, gotta talk about the soundtrack by Jun Senoue, who is just making love to a guitar for the majority of it, and it is incredible. I love this game. It might be far from the objective brilliance of, say, Sonic Dream Team or Sonic Mania, but it is just an incredible experience that is so confident, so sure-footed, that it becomes utterly infectious. Now, I'm gonna be honest, from here, from like number 3 onwards, all of these are kind of interchangeable anyway. Sonic Adventure 2, on any other day, could be number 1 on this list, as could the next game. These all might as well be number 1. But right now, I'm just factoring in how much I enjoy these games at this current time. In at number 2 is Sonic Unleashed. A game that released after what is generally considered by most of the gaming press and general public to be like one of the biggest low points in the franchise's history. This was kind of the first step back on the ladder for Sonic. And it didn't wow people at the time quite the way I think Sega would have wanted it to, as this still received very mixed to negative reviews. But I just don't get why. Because Sonic Unleashed is such a good game. For one, we've got a globe-trotting adventure for Sonic and Powers. This gives us our most extensive look at planet Earth in the Sonic universe, as each of the zones is a different country. And like in Sonic Adventure, we have these little hub worlds that we can travel to via Tails' tornado. Okay, good, great, excellent. That's what we want. That's a good step in the right direction, in my opinion. I love those immersive qualities such as the hub worlds. And while these hub worlds are a little bit smaller than the ones you'd find in Sonic Adventure, and no, you can't go traveling around them at the super speed of the regular Sonic, what I love about these hub worlds is actually the NPCs that populate them and how they have their own little stories that you can take part in. It could be reuniting a kid with his father who's been traveling around different countries as a sailor, or helping 2 Spagonians pluck up the courage to talk to each other. Or you can go to the shop and eat different national cuisines. Feed them the chip and find out if he likes them or not, or just give them to Sonic and get the EXP. There's a fortune teller in Shimar, and you might be wondering, why the hell would I want any of this in a Sonic game? I don't fucking care what you want, this is good stuff. I love this shit, because the thing about Sonic Unleashed is it is still comprised of your typical Sonic levels. These are just the hub worlds around them, which are pretty non-mandatory. You can just sprint straight through them and move on to the next level. But I love having this stuff here and engaging with it because it makes these locations feel more lived in. It makes these worlds feel more contextualized. So when I'm running through Rooftop Run Act 1 or whatever, I have more of a relationship with this place than I would if I was just running through it non-stop. It just makes everything richer and more meaningful. That is, for me, the thing that separates a game like Sonic Unleashed from a game like Sonic Generations, where it's doing the same thing in terms of boost gameplay and stuff like that. In fact, I'd say Sonic Generations actually does it a little better in that department, but we don't get a chance to just get close to these locations, which is also funny considering those are locations from our childhood in Sonic Generations. Well, these are just places around the world. It's also helped by some of the best art direction that a modern Sonic game has ever had. This feels like a Pixar movie. When I look at Spagonia and the human characters, the art style all feels very reminiscent to Pixar's Ratatouille, which just makes so much sense to me. I also just love how they've kind of Sonicified a lot of real-world locations. Then, of course, gameplay is kind of divided up into 2 different categories. You've got the day stages and the night stages. And the night stages, you transform into the Werehog because Sonic has been infected by dark Gaia energy that has transformed his body, but not broken his spirit because he's just a cool guy like that. So by night, it becomes more kind of a typical 3D platformer with some classic God of War inspired combat. And none of that's bad, in my opinion. You can, of course, debate whether or not this should be here in a Sonic game, whether or not it should be mandatory in a Sonic game, because, you know, I said how much I loved the RPG elements that were of the hub worlds, but those are optional. The Werehog is not optional. And I get it, having this here could feel like a roadblock when you just want to partake in the Sonic action, but again, it's actually a really fun gameplay style if you just kind of accept it. You don't have to. I do get why people object to having this here. And I think the biggest mistake it makes is that your first impression with the Werehog isn't going to be great because you don't really have any combos or anything like that, because you have to level him up. And I think if it'd come out a little more leveled up from the get-go, people would see the vision a bit sooner. But a fully leveled up Werehog is a force to be reckoned with. This also probably has one of the best stories in a modern Sonic game, and I'm also saying that without the qualifying statement of, oh, it's badly translated and it's a bit goofy. No, again, it kind of has a Pixar movie feel to it. The friendship between Sonic and Chip is at the forefront here, and it genuinely feels really nice. I like how Sonic starts the game kind of cocky and arrogant, like Sonic typically is, but then once he's brought back down to Earth, quite literally, and meets Chip, he kind of fits more into that big brotherly sort of role, and he's a bit more serious and matured. I really enjoy that. I like the roles that Amy and Tails play in this, although Tails does get his first moment of cowering in fear from a villain he could probably beat himself. Dr. Robotnik is on top form here. He truly feels determined to win this time. And there's something so awesome about when the Werehog is just done with Dr. Eggman, rips him out of his Egg Dragoon and just chucks him into the core of the Earth. That goes hard. And of course, you've got the best opening cutscene in just anything. So good. Just so good. Sonic Unleashed isn't perfect. It has its stumbling points for definite. Progression gating, and again, I think to say that the Werehog doesn't belong here is a valid take, even if I do disagree. But we've got definitely the best looking Sonic game here, and probably one of the most immersive we've ever had. And I think you'll find that immersion is something I value really highly. Which is why number one's also going to come as a bit of a surprise. But in first place, we have Sonic Frontiers. Now, I'm gonna get the negative out of the way first. Yeah, it looks like a tech demo. Like somebody made a Sonic gameplay engine and then just dumped a load of assets in there just to show you what it's like to run around. And it doesn't help that the pop-in is also just breaking your immersion everywhere you look. The worlds do not look very lived in. In fact, I mean, they're lived and died in, but you kind of have to take the game's word for it, because a lot of the world building is all done purely just through dialogue exchanges, contextualizing things up a little bit, which is way too much of a crutch for this one. Things like immersive elements and the congruency of a game like, say, Sonic Dream Team, things that I really do value, are not present here in the slightest. Because what we have here is effectively a beta test presented to consumers to gauge interest and feed back to investors who are not very confident in the product they're selling. And the end result is that we have a game that is cosmetically ugly and has not a single dab of polish on the entire thing. It is held together by sticks and chewing gum. But also, it's an open world Sonic game with fighting in it, are you kidding me? I have never had this much freedom to just run around before. Look how tight the turning is. Anything is possible when you've got a gameplay style this versatile. Earning the spin dash and then just using it to fling off of anything that even looks remotely like a hill is one of the most fun things ever. Well, these bosses are pretty cool. Are you kidding me with these bosses, though? That might be the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. We get 2 different endings, and one of them lets us play as the other characters? Look how cool some of these platforming challenges are as well. But I kind of miss the more arcadey structure of the conventional Sonic game. Oh, but it's accounted for with cyberspace, which is all admittedly, very been there, done that. Until it's not. Holy crap, this final boss might be one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. This final boss is not. I can go fishing and it works. And there are just so many fun little things to do around these islands, such as the little puzzles and activities. And it's all tied together by a story that gives us a little more lore on Sonic history, tells us where the Chaos Emeralds come from, gives us a little backstory on Chaos, and treats its characters with respect, maturing them all up significantly, even going so far as to have the characters go their separate ways to go on adventures of their very own that they desperately need. Tails needs to discover his potential beyond Sonic, so he's gonna go on his own little quest. Knuckles finally choosing to live his own life away from the Master Emerald. Amy accepting her love of Sonic as just a part of who she is and going to spread that love with the rest of the world as opposed to just chasing Sonic all the time. Dr. Robotnik is a father now. Oh, and the music for the Titan fight. Oh my god. It's amazing. It's a game that gave me everything I wanted and more without polishing any of it. And all I ask is that we get more like this, inject it into my veins, but with polish next time. If Sonic Frontiers is this good, if Sonic Frontiers manages to make my number one best Sonic game on my list, with the budget of $5 and a packet of chewing gum, think of what more can be done if they realize the potential beyond what Sonic Frontiers could. And it's not just that I'm excited for the future, I constantly find myself getting back to Sonic Frontiers just to run around these worlds, even though all the puzzles are done, even though I've done everything, pretty much 100% of the game. I still just like running around these places, doing different stunts, finding out what different places I can reach with the spin dash. And that is what it's all about. I adore this game. I look at it, I see all of its very, very obvious flaws, but I am addicted to this game for how much fun I have with it. And I think, is this love? Am I in love with Sonic Frontiers? I'm in love with the Coco as well. Yeah, that was deliberate. I'm not planning on going on much of a tangent there. But okay, that is my top 15 best Sonic games of all time. And I know it's a weird list, but it is my personal perspective. So if you don't like it, you can go do one. But what do you guys think? What are your top 15 Sonic games? Comment below, discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below is the link to my Patreon where you can support me for more content and just make my life a whole lot easier. But there are rewards too, such as having your name in the credits of these videos. A special shout out goes to the patrons in the $10 tier. Who are
Glad Goku, Dear Denny, Kale Bennett, Fat Jordo, King K of Warheads, Super Hyper Mick SP Mach 2, Saurus the Skeptic. New year, new pair of underpants. That's right, a change of yearly.
And then in the $5 tier, we have KLX, Richard Rogers, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Vera Wild. Thank you folks so much for your generosity, and to all of you back home, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Get out of here, you little scamp.